Okay, so the last year and a half has just been a massive learning experience for me. And now that it's all coming to an end in this portion, I'm not saying that I don't continue learning, we all do. But this portion of it is coming to an end. God is revealing so much to me that happened that He intentionally blinded me from during this year, right? I cannot stress enough that the enemy is not a creator, that the enemy is not original. So many people claim that there's no more apostles or prophets, anything of the sort in the world, that they're all in the past. Now, Ephesians 4 teaches us that after Christ rose, this was after he had already set the 12 apostles up and everything, that there were more, that he sent out apostles, prophets, teachers, evangelists to mature the church. And the thing is, you guys, is we can't have mimics. Once again, Satan is not a creator. We can't have mockeries or mimics of something that doesn't exist, right? And I'll explain it to you. Everybody who is of God, every single person who follows God's will, has a mockery of them. And so there is true apostles, true prophets, true everything out there. And then there is a mockery that rises up through the line of Satan, through his seed, and causes havoc in the kingdom. Okay? And we see this in Jeremiah 27. Jeremiah is told by God to put on a physical yoke as symbolism of he is about to prophesy through Jeremiah to the nations. And he tells Jeremiah to put on this physical yoke, okay? And in this physical yoke, he says, prophesy that they will go under the yoke of King Nebuchadnezzar, my servant. King Nebuchadnezzar originally was not of God, but God sent him to be like a wild animal for a few years. He got humbled, and now he fully served God. He is God's servant, okay? And so he says they have to go under the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar. They have to serve Nebuchadnezzar. Do not believe anyone who says different. Okay, he says, do not believe anyone who says different. Do not believe the dreamers, the sorcerers, the prophets that come to tell you you do not have to serve the king, because you do have to serve the king. Okay, so in chapter 28, though, we get introduced to Hananiah. And the Bible tells us that Hananiah is the son of a prophet. I can't remember the prophet's name. But Hananiah comes into the picture and starts prophesying to Jeremiah in front of the priests and the people. And so he is prophesying in front of everyone that they will not have to serve Nebuchadnezzar, that they will no longer be under his yoke, and he gives a timeline of 2 years. And he says, because Nebuchadnezzar has stolen these people, or who has taken these people captive, that completely goes against what God had told Jeremiah in chapter 27, right? And so Jeremiah at first says, okay, well, he's prophesying peace, and he agrees with him. If that's the will of God, let it be done. And so, but in this, Jeremiah is still very careful, because Jeremiah recognizes, he goes, in the past, prophets have prophesied pestilence, sword, famine, all of this, right? He goes, for a prophet that prophesies peace, then we have to wait to see if it comes true, and then we know that they are truly sent of God. Okay, so that was the first portion of it. The second portion, then Hananiah comes over to Jeremiah, breaks the yoke off his neck, and claims more prophecy. Jeremiah says nothing. Jeremiah walks away, keeps him to himself, right? After Jeremiah walks away, the Lord speaks to Jeremiah and starts giving him a prophecy against Hananiah. And this prophecy against Hananiah tells Hananiah that you have prophesied against the Lord. Now, this is a summary. You have prophesied against the Lord. You have made people trust in a lie. Oh, you broke. This is part of it. He tells Hananiah, you broke a yoke of wood, but you put a yoke of iron on these people. And God then says, I will put an iron yoke on these people, so it's not easily broken, right? It is not an easy to break yoke. It's making it harder for people to come back to the truth, to get the yoke off of them. And he says in that prophecy, because you have made them trust in a lie. So these people have trusted Hananiah's prophecy, has believed the hyper grace prophecy that it was a lie. God to tell Hananiah that because of this, because you have prophesied against the Lord, you will die. And that was a physical death. Hananiah died 7 months later, or not 7 months later, but in the 7th month of that year. So he died within the same. So not only does everybody of God have an evil counterpart, but then also we have people out there prophesying, peace, peace, no destruction will come upon you, when the Lord is going, yes, destruction will come upon you. Yes, you will have to be under this burden. Yes, you will have to do this. And it's not because God is mean, but rather he uses these moments and times to draw people even closer to him, because they have to rely upon him in order to survive, in order to get through these hard times. He's actually using them to draw them closer. And when they believe the lie, when they believe that hyper grace, that nothing hard will come upon them, that they won't have to go through hard times or tribulation. Okay, Hebrews 5:9 tells us that Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered. We have to suffer to learn obedience. Then 2 Peter 5:10 tells us that, or 1 Peter 5:10, one of those tells us that when after we have suffered a little while, we will be strengthened and established. So God intentionally puts us through a form of suffering in order to strengthen and establish us, to grow roots in him. And then the false prophets come around, or the false apostles come around and tell us, no, none of those things will actually happen. That's not our God. When in reality it is. But it's out of love, it's out of peace, it's to grow us and firm us up, so we don't fall away that God is doing this. It's out of mercy and compassion that he is doing this, so that we don't fall away. And yet people are not listening to the real apostles or prophets, but rather listening to what their ears want to hear, what their itchy ears want to hear, what's easier in their own flesh to follow. Grow in the knowledge of the severity and the kindness of God, and how God's kindness really is, because this is all part of God's kindness in order to help us not fall away. But you also have to hear what God's apostles and prophets are truly saying, that it's not going to be pleasant to hear at the beginning, but we need to know it, right? Because Ecclesiastes tells us that the more we grow in knowledge, that the more sorrow comes upon us, but it's absolutely necessary. But these false apostles, these false teachers that are mocking the real teachers, that mocking the real apostles, mocking the real prophets, are trying to turn you astray. They will rise up in your life to keep you from following God's will, and that will put an iron yoke on you that will make it more difficult for you to turn to the truth. It's not impossible, but it's harder